Hey guys, BuildZoid here, and today we're going to be taking a look at another DDR5-8000 setup with Ryzen 9000. Again, on the MSI Mag X870 Tomahawk, which was provided by MSI, so big thank you to them for the motherboard, with the Ryzen 7 9700X, but this time the memory kit that I'm using is a Kingston 7200 CL38 1.45 volt XMP kit that I bought ages ago, because I originally bought this memory kit for testing Z790. So big thank you to the channel supporters for making purchases like that one possible. And the reason I'm using it here is because in the previous video with the G-Skill kit, it was really easy to get DDR5-8000 working, which was very surprising to me because for comparison, this kit, which is also Hynix 16 gigabit A-die in a single rank configuration, I've had it for ages, and I've basically never been able to run it at more than 7600. So after testing that G-Skill kit, right, the main question for me was like, was DDR5-8000 so easy because of the CPU or the memory kit or the BIOS version on the motherboard, maybe the motherboard? I decided to test the memory kit first because I think that's like the easy option, right? You can swap memory kits a lot faster than CPUs. I did also test like some 8200 Patriot memory sticks, which really didn't work, but I still have some more testing I want to do with those. And then I switched to this kit because I actually don't have that much A-die. Oh, actually, no, these days I do kind of have a lot of A-die. It used to be worse. Like, I used to only have, like, this was, like, one of my only 2 A-die kits for a very long time. But anyway, so I wanted to just try a different A-die kit, and I figured, you know what, I'd try this, because it's, like, old, it's way before AM5 was even remotely, like, capable of doing DDR5-8000, so I was just interested, like, will it work? And the answer is, yeah, actually. It works just fine. It basically didn't take any extra effort on my part compared to the G-Skill kit, other than, of course, the fact that the XMP profile is completely useless because it's not set up for DDR5-8000 at all. And again, I do have a fan on the memory sticks. Again, I don't really think it's that necessary because if we look at the memory temperatures, yeah, they're really low. Which is mainly because I'm not running any kind of crazy memory voltages over here. And actually, let's get the system specs out of the way. And in terms of the stress test that I ran, you can see Carhu 18 hours, no errors, of course. Windows hardware errors, no errors there. 3 hours of Y Cruncher, obviously no errors, and then 11 hours of Prime 95. So, yeah, this passes all of the stress tests. For comparison, that Patriot kit that I was testing, which, you know what, I'll just mention it. It's an 8200 CL38. I bought it because it was super cheap on Amazon. Like, it was the cheapest 8200 rated kit I could find. So I was like, oh, this might be really good. Turns out it's not. At least it's not good with this motherboard. I don't know if it's like a motherboard thing. I think it's a motherboard thing because that kit has like weird... The write termination on that kit is like different from all the other A-die kits I have, which doesn't really make a ton of sense. So either there's like a difference with the PCB or it's not actually A-die. I don't know. But what I do know is that I haven't managed to get that other kit to run more than, and that's not even at 8200, like that's DDR5-8000, because obviously at 8200 it starts, you know, bringing up the question of the CPU's memory controller. But that Patriot kit, even at DDR5-8000, it's just not stable for more than 3 hours in Prime 95. Like, I didn't even get to the other stress test because Prime 95 would error out. Though that, I don't know if that necessarily means that the other tests wouldn't have passed. Because you can sometimes have Prime 95 error out when other stuff wouldn't have any issues. But yeah, like that kit, I don't know what's going on with that one. I suspect it's a PCB thing and like a motherboard compatibility issue with it. At least that's what I'm hoping, because otherwise I'll feel like an idiot because I have a memory kit that doesn't work on literally any motherboards I have, because like it's meant for Intel, but we all know what my experience with high memory speeds on Intel is like, so, you know. Anyway, yeah, so after that experience of like that Patriot kit just being horrible to work with, I stuck this Kingston kit in and it just worked. Um, and in fact, it worked so well that I went ahead and tightened a few extra like tried out some extra things and tightened a few timings that aren't immediately visible in hardware info. So for one thing, thanks to a YouTube comment, I've managed to get the PHY RDLs to match. There was, I think, 2 people that pointed out the setting that basically gets the memory controller to train the, I believe it's round trip delay, is what the RDL stands for. Um, that gets the memory controller to train that tighter. And this helps with memory latency quite a bit. It's like having it matched between both memory channels. So that's cool, and that just doesn't cause any stability issues. I imagine this would also work on the G-Skill kit just fine. So yeah, it's just like my sort of thought process, like my process for testing this is like number one priority is get DDR5-8000 like working at pretty fast settings to begin with, but then like really try max it. Like I've actually not tested how much of a difference the RDLs make for like non like real benchmark performance. It's probably a decent amount if it behaves like the RTL timings on Intel do, but yeah, it's not like I don't see it as like a priority making sure that the RDLs are matched. But anyway, yeah, so that's another thing that I've tried out here. Is just getting those to match. So I'll show you the setting for getting that to work. The potential is that the reasoning that the motherboards actually default that setting so that the RDLs mismatch is that it helps stability. So I guess if you got unlucky with the like I would assume it's probably like a memory because I've not tested this a bunch. I would imagine it might be like a memory controller issue if you get the RDLs to match on both channels and then it's not stable. I would assume that's usually going to be a memory controller issue. It might be a motherboard thing as well. But yeah, I haven't done enough testing on that. Anyway, yeah, so like everything passed. Also, actually, one thing I think this is just something I noticed sort of when getting ready to record this video. So I left CLDO VDDP on auto, and you'll notice that it's at 1.1 volts instead of the 1.05 that it was for the G-Skill kit. This is still perfectly fine. It's not going to hurt the CPU. It's just like an interesting difference that this XMP memory kit is defaulting to a higher VDDP. I don't think that's necessary. Also, I'm using more SoC voltage because I was just lazy. Like, typing 105 into the BIOS takes slightly more effort than 1.1, right? Yeah. So, like, basically, I've put a bit more effort into the timings, but not as much. Like, the voltages are kind of auto, basically. So, yeah. Is there anything else I wanted to point out? Right. Also, of course, I have the CPU power limits raised, so I maxed out 134 watts. And because otherwise, well, I'm still not a fan of the fact that like I'm using a 9700X for this testing, and that's actually the next thing I want to experiment with. Because now that like evidently this motherboard and at least Hynix A die, because I have a suspicion that this board, I haven't tested a bunch of 24 gigabit M die on this yet. But I kind of have a suspicion that 24 gigabit might not play this well with this board. I haven't tried that yet. Where was I going with this? Right. The other thing that I really want to test is the 9950X again. Because now that I know that, like, at least with A die, 8000 is super easy on this board, I want to check if my, like, potato 9950X is, even on this BIOS version, is still extremely potato, and if it's just going to insta-crash like it has done in the past. So, yeah, we shall see. Because, yeah, that is something I'm wondering about. So anyway, and then, like, the concern is that with the 9700X, you can't put quite so much load on the memory as you can with a 9950X or a 9900X. But yeah, like, I also have a 9800X3D now that I need to test, and it's just like, and these tests literally take like a day or two to run, which I guess I could do less in like long verification runs, but with like my experience where like, you know, that Patriot kit errors out in 3 hours, it's like I don't feel comfortable running short stress tests, because it's just like, what if you just got lucky that it didn't error out, right? And obviously the same can be true for of an 11-hour stress test. What if I just got lucky that it, you know, it would have errored out at 12 hours and I stopped it at 11, therefore I didn't get to see the error. But I'm less concerned about that with an 11-hour run than with like a 1-hour run or a 2-hour run, right? So yeah. Though at like, it is definitely true that the single CCD CPUs, like, they can't get the memory temperatures as high as the dual CCD chips. Like, that's immediately visible. So if there's any kind of like temperature related stability issues, I mean, I could also just take the fan off the memory, and that would kind of cause the same problem, because that would make the memory run hotter. But if it's like power like, yeah, like the 9700X doesn't put that much load on the memory, but the same is also true with a 9800X3D, and let's be honest, I think most people buying AM5 are probably buying it for the 9800X3D. So the fact that, you know, your 8-core CPU can't smash the memory sticks that hard probably doesn't matter to most people that much. So anyway, yeah. So I'm not sure that I would say that you can buy any A-die kit and expect good results. I still have a bunch of other A-die kits to try, which I don't know if I want to... I need to come up with a shorter way of testing this, because this is ridiculous. Like, I kind of want to drop one of these tests, but I don't know which one. And my main problem with Prime 95 is how it like runs a lot of different load scenarios. It's not the same thing over and over again. And it's really obvious on the oscilloscope that it's like VT3 is a very repetitive load pattern. This, on the other hand, is just completely all over the place. Like, it runs at high voltage, very low voltage, medium voltage. Like, it bounces around a lot in terms of like how it's loading the CPU, as well as the memory. And so, yeah, I don't like, because it's so all over the place, I don't like the idea of running it for a shorter period, like running it for a short period of time. Because I feel like that won't get through all the different load scenarios that this goes through. Carhu, on the other hand, is very, very constant, but I usually run that overnight, so the runtime on that is kind of out of my control. Right, because I'm asleep when it finishes. So anyway, I think at this point we'll just go into the BIOS and take a look at the extra things that I did for this setup. It should reboot pretty quickly. Yep. Also, if you're wondering why the memory slots are yellow, I have Captain Tape over them so that dust doesn't get into them. Not really a concern for this motherboard, but like sometimes I leave motherboards sitting on the test bench for just forever, and then and I've never actually had a problem with like dust in the memory slots causing instability directly. But I just don't like the idea of the memory slots getting like super dusty. So put tape over them. Not any tape. Like, this is tape specifically designed for use with electronics, but yeah, that's why that's there. I don't think that's like a necessary thing you should do. That's just me being weird about dust. Don't like dust on my memory slots, even though I've never seen it actually. Like, it is a problem if you trap dust in the gold fingers. So like sometimes I'll have to wipe off a memory kit before it like behaves properly. Like wipe it down with like alcohol and stuff. Sometimes I even have to do that with brand new memory sticks. And also, like, I've also had issues like hair getting caught in memory slots. That's actually usually the problem I've run into. But yeah. So that's why the tape is there. I don't suggest that you actually copy that. That's just, yeah. Anyway, SoC voltage set manually to 1.1. I have the high voltage mode enabled. Manually set the voltages to 1.45. VDDP is on auto, yeah, so it did default to 1.1 volts, which is kind of interesting, but it didn't cause any instability. The thing with the VDDP defaulting to 1.1 volts, depending on the CPU and the motherboard, and maybe even the memory kit, you'll find that there, like, sometimes the VDDP will have like a very specific sweet spot. And I would generally guess that it's probably less than 1.1 volts most of the time. Though it really does depend on the motherboard. Like, usually with this 9700X, I've been using 1.05 volts for DDR5-8000. And so, yeah. Though also this CPU has been really well behaved with in terms of stability at DDR5-8000. So I don't know if that's actually the optimal voltage. It's just like, well, that works, and it's definitely not super high. Whereas some of my other chips that I have will have, like, say my 7950X very specifically needs like 1.0. Okay, no, the 7950X is 1.05. It's the 7900X that needs like exactly 1.03 to work at DDR5-8000, or it just doesn't. And that one only works at DDR5-8000 on like one motherboard with one very specific BIOS version and nothing else. So, yeah. Anyway, but with this 9700X, that's really, like, this CPU, like, the CPU is a lot better than my other CPUs, as far as I can tell for memory. I haven't tried the 9800X 3D, so who knows? That might be even better than this. Other than that, here in the main section, I have the just FCLK synchronized, UCLK equals MCLK/2. I haven't turned on the latency killer because if you check what the description says, enhances latency performance but could potentially reduce CPU performance. I imagine what this does is it either messes with the memory controller's scheduling or it messes with the CPU's power management. Because the problem with IDA's memory latency test is that it's so low load on the memory controller that the memory controller is like actively falling asleep when running it. That's one of the reasons why like disabling power down mode helps the IDA latency test, is because normally the CPU doesn't power down the memory sticks if it's, you know, reading and writing from the memory sticks with any reasonable amount of regularity. But because the IDA latency test sends like one memory request every 10 milliseconds or something, the CPU basically isn't doing anything for 10 milliseconds at a time, and it just goes into the deepest idle state it can, which is not ideal for latency because then you need to wake the CPU back up. So, yeah, and so, like, I don't know exactly what the latency killer does, but I haven't tested it yet, but I don't have a lot of, I don't expect it to actually help in anything that matters. And IDA's latency test, unfortunately, doesn't matter, because if it did, like, Comet Lake would be the greatest CPU ever made. By that, I mean the 10900K. Anyway, so memory timings. Again, CL38. Like, I'm not, you know, trying to push the primaries super low here. TRC-DWR 16 and TRC-DWR again at 16. I explained why this works in the previous video. TRC-DRD at 46. So this should be very, like, yeah, I'd say most 8i kits can probably run TRC-D46 at 8000 and 1.45 volts. TRP38, TRAS48. This might go lower, but didn't feel like pushing it. TRC86, TWR48, that's minimized. TRFC480. Technically, this can sometimes go a little bit lower than this, but not much lower than this. These two don't do anything, so I've set them to 69 because that's nice. TREFI is set to 65,000, so that's completely maxed out. You can't set it any higher. RTP still at 12, TRRD-L and S at 8, and TFAL at 32. Because that matches the burst length of DDR5. And also, as far as I know, in 2-to-1 mode, setting these two lower than this doesn't work. At least that's what I've heard from somebody else. I haven't like gone and verified it myself. But also, it's worth noting that setting setting either of these below the burst length of DDR5 has very marginal performance gains because it's basically just a scheduling thing. It doesn't directly translate into like, oh, you can squeeze more read commands back to back. It's like you can maybe squeeze activate commands in between some other stuff more efficiently. So yeah, like the performance benefits of lowering the TRRDs below 8 are very, very small. Though raising them above 8 is really bad, especially TRRDS. Like, you should never, ever have this set above 8. TFAW at 32 because TRRDS is 8, so 8 times 4 is 32. WTRL at 16, WTRS at 2, which is pretty sure about as low as it's ever going to go. SCL's at 8, both write-to-write and read-to-read. Manually set read-to-read SC and write-to-write SC to 1 for this, because this being an XMP kit, this is one of those situations where I would actually expect some motherboards to set these to 2. This motherboard I don't believe does that, but you will run into some motherboards where if you're setting, like if you use a non-Expo memory kit and you try to run it at DDR5-8000, the read-to-read SC, write-to-write SC, these two will get set to 2, and that's really bad for performance because it basically puts a it puts like a 1-cycle gap between your read command, like back-to-back read commands and back-to-back write commands, effectively removing 12.5% of your memory bandwidth. Probably not that big of a problem on a Ryzen CPU because these don't really have a lot of memory bandwidth in the first place thanks to the Infinity fabric, but not ideal. So, yeah, neither of these should ever be higher than like, well, ideally they're never higher than 1, and even setting them to 2 is a bad idea. Then we have write to read at 4. Might go lower. I didn't bother to check, and read to write at 18. TSME I've disabled. And then the thing to get the PHY RDLs to match is this setting down here. So, yeah. Unfortunately, I can't explain what the description for this means. So, yeah. And I haven't checked if it works at 0. At 2, it still doesn't, like, the RDLs won't match. So, though I don't know if on some motherboards, like, the description says it defaults to 3, and at 3 it'll run 3848 for the RDLs. At 1, it runs 3838 for both. So, yeah. And I haven't checked what 0 does. And then that's it in terms of the timings that I adjusted here. But I didn't just adjust that. In the advanced menu, in AMD overclocking, under DDR Infinity and DDR Infinity fabric frequency, timings, DDR options, you'll notice I set the nitro timings to 131. Yeah, these basically just improve performance. If you set them too low, it stops being stable. For 2-to-1 mode, generally, at least with Hynix ICs, you can run 131. If you're in 1-to-1 mode and at like 6000 or 6400 or something, you can run like 120 or sometimes 121 is necessary. It kind of depends. But yeah, for 8000, it's basic. Like, I don't think there's any chance you'd be running anything less than 131. And this also helps with memory performance just in general. So, yeah, and that's everything I did with this setup. And so, yeah, this doesn't really, like, prove anything yet, because this is just one other Hynix 8i kit, and like I mentioned, I have a bunch of other kits that I would like to check. Because the thing is like, the main thing I'm wondering at this point is, like, can you just buy any 8i and expect it to do DDR5-8000, or is there, like, do you have to watch out for, like, oh, some memory manufacturers use, like, a wacky PCB or something like that? Because that has been a thing in the past, even with DDR4. Though there it was like, there's like specific, yeah, that's been a thing with DDR4. So, Yeah, though obviously with Ryzen you do have the option of just setting the memory controller to 1-to-1 and just not caring about 2-to-1 mode capabilities. That's like the nice. I think that's like the nice thing with Ryzen is like if for some reason you can't get DDR5-8000 to work, you can just run like 6200 instead, and it'll perform almost the same. So yeah. But like for me, this is mainly like I want to know, like I want to test the boards and I want to test the memory kits, right? Like the performance side of this to me is like my daily system runs DDR5-6000, even though like I've been thinking about switching it over to some like higher speed 2-to-1 mode setup for quite a while now. But I'm lazy to swap the memory sticks out, and it's on like 16 gigabit M die, which does not clock very high at all. So, yeah. Is that it for this video? I think that's it. Yeah, I wouldn't take this as like, oh, you can just buy any random A die kit and expect it to do DDR5-8000, but I would say your chances of, you know, a lot of A die kits being able to do DDR5-8000 are probably pretty high. At least if your CPU is capable. Because, like, again, like, I haven't checked with the 9950X yet, but I'm pretty sure when I put the 9950X back in this motherboard, it's going to go right back to just immediately crashing at DDR5-8000, even with an Expo memory kit. So, yeah, you know, but at least it looks like the memory side of it might not be, like the memory stick side of things might not be that sensitive, is what I'm hoping for. Yeah, I don't, like, maybe I'll just, like, the lazy option I'm sort of toying with for, like, testing the memory kits faster is just, like, running a few hours of Prime 95 large FFTs. Because it does get the memory reasonably hot. And it'll probably error out. So I'm thinking like 8 hours or something, because that way I could squeeze 2 memory kits into a day, assuming that they work, right? Because obviously if something doesn't work, that's actually nice, because if it really doesn't work, then you find out pretty quickly. It's like, oh, it's erroring out in an hour? Well, yeah, that's bad. But when something works, right, and you need to go through like a full set of stress tests, yeah, that's not great, because that just takes forever. Or, well, I mean, it's good that it works, but it's not great from, like, a time perspective, because, yeah, it takes forever to test. So, anyway, hopefully you found this somewhat interesting. I'm going to bring the system specs back, and, yeah, I've got, like, honestly, I'm kind of more tempted to stick another memory kit, because that is really, well, my options are like swap CPU, and then if it doesn't work, then I'll have to swap the CPU again. I think I'll just stick another memory kit in and see if DDR5-8000 works on something else. I'm gonna go for an even lower rated kit, because this is still like a pretty high speed kit, right? 7200 CL38. I think the next thing I'm gonna try is a 6000 CL30 A die kit. And see if that does DDR5-8000. I kind of expected that it will, but I could be wrong, and that's why I test stuff. So anyway, that's it for the video. Hopefully you found it somewhat interesting, if not particularly useful. And if you'd like to support the channel, there is a whole bunch of links down in the description that you could check out, and that would be very much appreciated. So yeah, that's it. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.